Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you've poured your heart into creating an innovative new product, say an ergonomic coffee mug. It's got a uniquely sculpted handle for ultimate comfort, maybe a distinctive no-drip lip, and a special texture that keeps your drink warmer longer. You want to protect all of that, right? But the question is, can you? Not just the brand name, but the very look and feel of it. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating and, yeah, often nuanced area of U.S. law that determines exactly that, the functionality doctrine in trademark and trade dress law. We've sifted through a good stack of legal scholarship and some really landmark court cases. They show why some designs get protected as source identifiers, that unique thing that tells you instantly who made it, while others, no matter how famous, have to remain free for anyone to use. Our mission today is basically to give you a clear shortcut to understanding this principle, help you spot the aha moments and navigate this balance between design protection and open competition.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is that balance the law tries to strike. Fostering innovation on one hand, but ensuring a competitive marketplace on the other. This deep dive should show you not just what functionality means, but really why it's such a cornerstone of intellectual property. It raises a really important question. When does a useful design become so fundamental to how a product works, or even just its appeal, that letting one company own it would actually stifle the market?
Okay, so let's start right there. This functionality doctrine sounds pretty technical. What does it mean in practice for, say, our ergonomic mug example, or really any product design?
Well, simply put, the doctrine says that a product feature or design that is functional just cannot be protected as a trademark or trade dress. It's what lawyers call a negative requirement, meaning for a design to even be eligible for protection, it must not be functional. So, with your mug example, if that specially sculpted handle is functional because, well, it makes the mug easier or more comfortable to hold, then that specific handle design can't be exclusively owned under trademark law.
And just to clarify, when we say trademark or trade dress, trademarks are names, logos, right?
Hmm.
But trade dress is broader.
Exactly. Trade dress is the overall visual impression. Could be the product shape, its packaging, even, like you said, the look of a restaurant.
So that unique mug handle, the texture, maybe even the overall shape, that could be trade dress. But if any part of it is functional, protection is just off the table.
Yeah.
Even as people see it and think, that's brand X.
Precisely. If a feature is found functional, then yes, that specific aspect cannot be protected as trade dress. Doesn't matter if it's 2D, 3D, packaging, sounds, smells. If it's functional, anyone can copy it and use it. The law basically prioritizes free competition here, even if that means tolerating some degree of what might feel like consumer confusion, at least in the short run. It's just a key part of how the U.S. system manages exclusive rights.
That feels like a pretty significant trade-off. The law is sort of saying, choose your protection lane carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't some dusty old rule nobody uses, right? Our sources mention courts followed it for ages, but Congress actually wrote it into the main trademark law, the Lanham Act, in 1998.
That's right. Section 2E5.
Yeah, cementing it in statute, not just court decisions, really underlines its importance today.
Absolutely. Codification gave it real teeth and clarity.
Okay, so the why behind this seems just as interesting as the what. Sources point to two main reasons, two big pillars. Let's break down the first one, the line between trademarks and patents.
Right. One of the most critical functions is to make sure that features with practical utility things that make a product work better or are designed for a purpose are protected exclusively by patent law, not trademark law. Patents give you a monopoly, but it's for a limited time. Typically around 20 years for a utility patent covering how something works or is made, and you have to disclose the invention publicly. Oh, okay. So a trademark, which you can potentially renew forever, could effectively create a permanent monopoly on a useful feature if this doctrine didn't exist. That sounds like what people call a backdoor patent.
That's exactly the term used. It prevents gaming the system. IP law has different lanes for different types of protection. If you want long-term protection for something genuinely useful, functionally advantageous, you need to go the patent route, with all its limitations and requirements. Trademark isn't a shortcut. Functional designs come from engineering, right? Making something work better, last longer, cost less to make, that textured finish on your mug that keeps the drink hotter, that's utilitarian.
So follow that logic. If a feature clearly has a practical purpose, but maybe it wasn't patented, or the patent expired, does it just become fair game? Anyone can use it? Yes, essentially. If it's useful and not covered by an active patent, it generally falls into the public domain. Competitors can copy it freely. And there's another point here. Often, the more functional a feature is, the less likely it is to act as a unique source identifier. If everyone needs a similar feature to compete, it doesn't really point to one specific maker anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so patents versus trademarks is pillar one. What's the second big reason for this doctrine?
The second pillar is all about the right to compete. It's about maintaining a free and fair market. The doctrine ensures competitors can copy features they need to compete effectively. It's a balancing act, protecting brand identity versus preventing one company from locking up essential product characteristics. The restatement of unfair competition, which is pretty influential, puts it clearly. A design is functional if it offers real benefits. Manufacturing, marketing, use, and competitors need it, and there aren't practical alternatives.
So the key question boils down to, can someone else compete effectively without copying this specific design feature? If the answer is no, maybe because there just aren't other good ways to achieve the same result, then that feature is probably functional. You can't trademark it. It sounds like the law is trying to stop anyone from cornering the market on a basic way of doing something.
Precisely. It keeps the door open for others to innovate and compete on a level playing field.
Okay, so we have the what and the why. Now for the nuts and bolts. How do courts actually decide if something is functional? You mentioned it's been a bit of a moving target.
It really has. Early cases like the famous Kellogg shredded wheat case back in 1938, the pillow-shaped biscuits.
Right, I remember reading about that one. Seems odd to think of a biscuit shape as functional.
Well, Justice Brandeis defined it broadly then. He said the shape was functional because using other shapes would, and I quote, increase the cost of the biscuit and lessen its high quality. So it came down to cost and quality.
So that early view was really tied to the economics of making it and the value to the consumer, cost and quality. How did we get from there to the traditional rule we hear about?
That came into sharper focus in 1982. The Supreme Court gave us the traditional rule in a case called Inwood Labs. It involved the colors of drug capsules. The court said a feature is functional if it's essential to the use or purpose of the article or if it affects the cost or quality of the article, so still focus squarely on the utilitarian side.
Okay, Inwood gives us that core utilitarian test. But what about designs that are unique but maybe less obviously about pure function, like a really distinctive bottle shape for, say, a cleaning spray? Another case from '82, Morton Norwich, addressed that.
Exactly. Morton Norwich gave us a four-factor test that courts still rely on heavily today for utilitarian functionality. It's more nuanced. The factors are, 1, is there a utility patent covering the design that boasts about its practical advantages? 2, does the company itself advertise the utilitarian benefits? 3, are there other design alternatives available that offer similar practical benefits? And 4, does the design result from a simpler or cheaper manufacturing method? In the Morton Norwich case itself, looking at a spray bottle, the court actually found the overall design was not functional, partly because there were plenty of other ways to design a workable spray bottle. Lots of alternatives.
That Morton Norwich test seems pretty comprehensive for digging into utility. But sources mention courts got a bit tangled up, especially distinguishing this competitive necessity idea from the core Inwood rule. What untangled that?
Yeah, that needed clarification. The Supreme Court stepped in again in 2001 with traffic devices. This one involved those dual spring stands you see on roadsides. The court made it really clear if a feature is functional under that basic Inwood rule, meaning it's essential for use, purpose, cost, or quality, then you stop there. You don't need to analyze competitive necessity or alternatives for utilitarian features. Traffics essentially said that the significant non-reputation-related disadvantage test, which came from an earlier case called Qualitex, was meant to add to Inwood, not replace it, especially when looking beyond pure utility.
Okay, so the big takeaway from Traffics for utilitarian stuff is function trumps all. If it helps the product work better or cheaper, it stays in the public domain for competition. Full stop. Doesn't matter how unique it looks or if there are other ways to do it.
Precisely. It really cemented that engineering-driven view for utilitarian features. A later case, Value Engineering, confirmed this. Alternatives might be relevant overall, but if a feature's functional for Inwood reasons, alternatives don't save it.
This strong stance on utility, especially for things that improve function, must have big implications for designs that were once patented, right? What happens when a utility patent expires? Does the feature automatically become functional and unprotectable as trade dress?
Well, having a utility patent is definitely strong evidence of functionality. In traffics, the court said an expired utility patent creates a presumption of functionality. The burden then shifts to the person claiming trade dress rights to prove it's not functional, maybe showing it's just arbitrary decoration. There was a case, Vornado, about a spiral fan grill design that was part of a patent. The court there basically said if the design was a key inventive part of the patent, patent policy means it goes public when the patent expires, even if you could argue it wasn't strictly functional otherwise. But another case, Thomas and Betts, about a cable tie head, later added a wrinkle. If the specific feature wasn't actually claimed in the patent, it might still be protectable as trade dress if it's non-functional. So, it's nuanced. Depends on the patent details.
Okay, so a utility patent is a major hurdle, maybe even a roadblock. For trade dress, got it. Who has to prove all this? Is the burden on the company claiming protection or the one challenging it?
Good question. For unregistered trade dress, like the look of that restaurant, the law was changed in 1999. Now, the plaintiff, the one asserting the trade dress rights, has the burden to prove the feature is not functional. But for registered trademarks or trade dress, it flips. The registration itself provides prima facie evidence of validity, so the defendant, the challenger, has to prove it is functional.
Right, now we get to the really tricky part, the one that causes a lot of debate. Aesthetic functionality. This isn't about how something works or how much it costs. It's about how it looks. Can a design that's just beautiful or appealing be considered functional, legally, and therefore unprotectable?
Yeah, this is where things get murky. The concept goes way back, actually, to early legal writings, like the 1938 Restatement of Torts. The idea was, if people buy goods mainly because they look good, for their aesthetic value, then maybe those attractive features are functional because they fulfill the product's aesthetic purpose. Think of, like, a heart-shaped box for Valentine's candy. Its appeal is its shape, right? So is the shape functional in an aesthetic sense.
Aesthetic value just seems so subjective. I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. How can courts apply that consistently without just making random decisions? Or, worse, discouraging beautiful design?
Exactly. That's the core problem and why it's been so inconsistent. There was a Ninth Circuit case, Pagliaro, back in '52, involving China patterns. They took a really broad view, suggesting a feature was functional if it was an important ingredient in the commercial success of the product. That led to this weird potential outcome. The more beautiful and successful your design, the less likely you could protect it, which, as you said, seems totally counterintuitive and a terrible incentive for designers.
Yeah, that sounds backward. If you make something stunningly beautiful, and that's why people buy it, Pagliaro might say that beauty itself is the function, so tough luck. Did other courts buy into that?
Not really, no. There was strong pushback. The Third Circuit, in a case called Keen Core, explicitly rejected that broad Pagliaro idea, saying it would just stifle attractive design. And even the Ninth Circuit later kind of walked it back in a case called Clicks Billiards, involving pool hall decor. They clarified they hadn't really adopted aesthetic functionality in that super broad sense. So, yeah, lots of disagreement.
Okay, so the lower courts were all over the place. Where does the Supreme Court land on this? Have they given us any clear guidance on handling aesthetic functionality today?
Well, they haven't explicitly endorsed the term aesthetic functionality or rejected it outright, but they have dropped hints about how to approach it. Remember the Qualitex case, the one about the green gold color for dry cleaning pads, famous case allowing a single color trademark. In that decision, the court mentioned that a feature is functional if letting one company use it exclusively would put competitors at a significant non-reputation-related disadvantage.
Okay, significant non-reputation-related disadvantage. This sounds like it's getting back to the competitive landscape, doesn't it? How's that different from just looking for alternative designs, which traffic said wasn't the main test for utilitarian features?
That's the key distinction. In traffics, Justice Kennedy specifically said that while the Inwood rule is the primary test for utilitarian function, that Qualitex disadvantage test is appropriate for aesthetic cases, meaning for designs where the issue isn't use, purpose, cost, or quality, but purely looks, you do look at the competitive effect. You ask, would protecting this specific look effectively shut competitors out of the market or put them at a huge disadvantage unrelated to the original brand's reputation? Here, alternatives do matter.
Ah, I see. So it's kind of a two-step process now. First, check for basic utilitarian function using Inwood. If it passes that, it's not utilitarian. Then, if it's an aesthetic feature, you might apply the Qualitex competitive disadvantage test.
That seems to be the prevailing approach now, yes. Recent appeal court cases, like one involving Dippin' Dots ice cream and another about car logos on accessories, automotive gold, have sort of followed this hybrid path. They often ask, is the whole point of this feature just to signal the source, the brand, or does it also have this separate aesthetic pull that's genuinely essential for anyone wanting to compete in that space? In the Dippin' Dots case, for instance, the court found the little colorful ice cream spheres were functional both ways. Utilitarian because the size and shape related to the flash freezing process and portioning, and aesthetically functional because competitors really needed similar small, colorful spheres to even offer a comparable product. Protecting them would kill competition. Shows how intertwined it can be.
But even with that two-step approach and the Qualitex test, it still feels like aesthetic functionality is a fuzzy concept that many experts find problematic.
Absolutely. Many scholars argue it's just too vague and maybe unnecessary. They suggest focusing on more traditional trademark concepts like distinctiveness or genericness. I mean, if a design is purely decorative, but consumers don't actually see it as indicating the source, the brand, then it just isn't distinctive enough to be a trademark anyway. Problem solved. Or if it's a common shape everyone uses, like that heart-shaped candy box, it's probably generic for that type of product, unprotectable for that reason. Why bring in the confusing aesthetic functionality label?
Well, this has been quite the deep dive, from shredded wheat and spray bottles to sign stands and even ice cream shapes. We've really seen how U.S. law tries to walk this tightrope between rewarding innovation and ensuring fierce market competition. It's a definite reminder that not every cool design can be owned forever.
Yeah, stepping back, this whole doctrine really highlights that constant push and pull between intellectual property rights, which grant monopolies, and the public domain, which keeps things free for everyone. The law wants to reward creativity, sure, but it also wants to make sure that essential, useful, or even just fundamentally appealing designs stay accessible so others can build on them and compete. And that raises a really interesting question for the future, doesn't it? With designs getting more complex, technology evolving, consumer taste changing so fast, how will courts keep interpreting functionality effectively? How do they keep pace without accidentally shutting down either innovation or competition?
That is definitely a question to chew on. And for you, our listener, the next time you pick up a product with some unique feature, maybe it is that ergonomic coffee mug. Think about this. Is that cool handle just for looks? Or does it actually make it work better? Does it contribute to its purpose, its efficiency, maybe even its fundamental appeal in a way the law might call functional? Having this lens, this understanding of functionality, could really change how you see the products all around you, and maybe even spark some insights into that delicate, crucial balance between owning an idea and the freedom for everyone else to create.